If we had been told at the end of 2024 that Ferrari would be in such difficulty, perhaps few would have believed it. Instead, the 2025 season is more complex than expected. The SF25 has not managed to close the gap with its rivals, and as of today, Ferrari finds itself 300 points behind McLaren. A situation far from favorable, and in today's video, we are going to look at Villeneuve's statements on the matter. We need to hear from Ralf Schumacher, who has spoken out about Lewis Hamilton. We also need to talk about Alonso's statements regarding his possible retirement, Andrea Stella defending Piastri, and the Pirelli test with Grosjean also participating for Haas. Before we start, please leave a supportive like, and if you enjoy the videos, subscribe and activate notifications. That said, let's get started right away. Frederic Vasseur is not raising the white flag. In fact, interviewed by Formula One itself, the team principal explained that potential of the SF25 is not to be discarded. But turning speed into concrete results is still complicated. The updates brought have worked. The pace in some races has been good. I think of Monza and Baku. But having potential is one thing. Knowing how to turn it into points is another. We need to do better on race weekends. The Frenchman knows that Ferrari is still in full pursuit of Mercedes, second in the Constructors' Championship. And looking at the remaining calendar, the track most favorable to Ferrari could be Las Vegas, thanks to the long straights that match well with the good aerodynamic efficiency of the SF25 when the rear wing is unloaded. On other circuits, it will be tougher. McLaren has a very complete car, and Mercedes seems able to adapt better to different conditions, especially with a colder track. The realistic challenge remains to at least maintain second place in the Constructors and close the era of ground effect cars without sinking further. It's not the goal fans dreamed of at the beginning of the year, but avoiding further decline is crucial for the future. From the outside, it's clear that the SF25 has not lived up to its promises. The updates have improved some aspects, but the balance remains complex and the optimal usage window is narrow. When mechanical grip and tire management fall out of target, Ferrari becomes vulnerable again. McLaren has brought more effective and consistent developments. Mercedes has capitalized when needed, while at Maranello they always seem to be chasing. That said, the season is not over. With races like Las Vegas and Abu Dhabi, where Ferrari's aerodynamic package can have a chance, second place in the Constructors is still within reach. However, perfect weekends are needed, clean strategies, solid qualifying. This is crucial, and above all, no operational errors that have already compromised too many points. Ferrari is far from the top, but not everything is to be discarded. The updates are giving encouraging signals, and if the team manages to combine performance and race management, the season finale can still save some face. It's not enough to satisfy those dreaming of the World Championship, but in a bad year, it can make a difference to build solid foundations ahead of the regulatory revolution of 2026. But we also need to see those who are more skeptical about Ferrari, like Jacques Villeneuve, who has spoken out about Lewis Hamilton's situation and his impression of the team. At the end of July, the official announcement arrived in Maranello. Frederic Vasseur, team principal since 2023, renewed with a multi-year contract. The idea was to provide stability and continuity to the project. But since then, the results have worsened. In Hungary, Ferrari seemed one step away from victory. Charles Leclerc had led the race for a long time, but an inexplicably slow final stint made him slip from first to fourth place. At the resumption of the championship in the Netherlands, a double debacle arrived with the retirement of both cars. At Monza, in front of the home crowd, the minimum podium goal faded, and finally another black weekend arrived in Baku. Hamilton only 8th, Leclerc 9th, hampered by wrong setup choices that already compromised qualifying. Jacques Villeneuve, 1997 world champion, did not mince words and said, there was the big announcement of Fred Vasseur's renewal, and then the team collapsed. When Vasseur was reconfirmed, it seems that the tension has dropped. Before, at least there was the push to show something. Since then, Ferrari has gone downhill. Monza was supposed to be the perfect weekend, and it wasn't. Baku used to be a fantastic track for Leclerc, and instead it was one of their worst weekends. Ferrari is completely lost and needs a clear direction. Villeneuve is already looking beyond. According to him, the team might be mentally already projected to 2026, when the regulations will change substantially. Lighter cars, power units without MGH, mixed aerodynamics, and an even more hybrid engine. A reset that could allow Ferrari to start again from an almost blank sheet. Villeneuve's words are harsh, but they hit a raw nerve. It's true, after Vasseur's renewal, continuity and serenity were expected, but Ferrari seems to have shut down. Some technical errors like the setups in Baku, the not very incisive strategies at Monza, suggest that the team is struggling to keep the overall pressure high. In my opinion, the hypothesis is that Maranello has already shifted a large part of the resources to the 2026 project. It's not bad to plan for the future, but letting go too soon can be costly, especially when you're fighting for the Constructors' Championship and need to secure that second place ahead of Mercedes and Red Bull. Ferrari is experiencing a bleak autumn after a season start that was at least promising. Vasseur's renewals have brought the hoped-for solidity, and Villeneuve's criticisms are a reflection of the fans' frustration. If Maranello has truly decided to focus everything on 2026, the minimum goal must remain to save second place in the Constructors and close this technical era with dignity. Otherwise, the risk is arriving at the new regulations with an already disheartened environment. We also need to do a brief analysis on Lewis Hamilton, who nonetheless improved in the Baku race, managing to keep up with Leclerc's performance compared to what we saw at the start of the season. Villeneuve has weighed in on this matter. Hamilton's 2025 with Ferrari has been disappointing so far, if measured against expectations. The Englishman has shown flashes of talent, like the victory in the sprint race in China and the pole in the Shanghai sprint qualifying, but in the main Sunday races, he has never managed to reach the podium. The only top three besides China came in the chaotic Miami sprint race, influenced by fortuitous events. The situation becomes even heavier when looking at what others are doing. In Baku, it was even Carlos Sainz who brought Williams to the podium, a result that seemed like science fiction at the start of the season. Instead, the former Ferrari driver celebrated before Hamilton, and Villeneuve said that the combination of Ferrari and Hamilton doubles the effect of every result. Anything good or bad is amplified by Lewis's presence. When races go poorly, everything seems worse than it actually is, and vice versa. It's the bet Ferrari made, and it works the other way around too. Ferrari amplifies the effect on Hamilton. They only double the sensations. It's either fantastic or terribly bad in an even bigger way. According to the Canadian, the Ferrari and Hamilton pairing creates a magnifying glass. Every success becomes epic, but every failure is perceived as a total disaster. And this year, with an often unpredictable and difficult to tune SF25, the balance tips towards the negative side. Villeneuve is right. The media effect of Hamilton at Maranello is enormous. If Ferrari wins a sprint, it seems like an immediate rebirth. But if they sink outside the podium on Sunday, the crisis appears catastrophic. This generates additional pressure on the team and the driver, which perhaps wasn't fully calculated. From a technical standpoint, the SF25 isn't stable enough, has a narrow usage window, complex tire management updates that work, but don't solve the basic limitations, and Hamilton is paying especially for the lack of consistency and some wrong strategic choices, as already happened in Baku. There's also a psychological factor. For him, winning with Ferrari would mean writing history. But when he's fighting for 6th or 7th place, the weight of expectations becomes overwhelming. But there are also those who have redeemed Hamilton's last race in Baku, saying it was his most positive since the start of the year. Former driver James Hinchcliffe highlighted this, commenting on Hamilton. 8th and 9th for Ferrari may seem negligible results, but let's look at the context. Comebacks from the big names were expected and didn't happen. Hamilton started 12th and finished 8th, beating Leclerc. For me, it's one of his best races of the year. Hinchcliffe pointed out an interesting aspect. Hamilton's change in attitude. More confidence in the car, more calm in managing the pace, and less nervous and more positive radio communication. A sign that perhaps the team has started to understand how to adapt the SF25 to the Englishman's driving style. He seemed more carefree and happy to race. Even after difficult qualifying, he was optimistic and knew he could gain positions. And he did. If he maintains this spirit, he can finally find the right feeling with Ferrari. I must say, however, that this clarification doesn't change the season, but it could be a psychological turning point. Hamilton had so far suffered mainly from the inability to make an impact on Sundays. Never any podium on Sundays, never competitive for victory, and often behind Leclerc. In Baku, he reversed the internal dynamics of the team and showed solid pace, even in a boring and difficult race to unlock. Sure, he finished ahead of Leclerc only because he didn't give back the position to the Monegasque, who let him pass earlier, and Ferrari remains far from the goals that matter. The 8th place is certainly not a success, but if Hamilton starts to feel more comfortable, this can give the team an extra weapon in the chase for second place in the Constructors and in building the 2026 project. For himself, it's a boost of confidence. Winning with Ferrari requires first of all getting in tune with a complicated and guided environment and a car, we can say, capricious. In Baku, a first sign of this process was seen. Hamilton didn't work miracles, but he gave the first real spark of his adventure in red. A solid comeback ahead of Leclerc and growing confidence in the SF25. In a season full of frustrations, this small step can weigh heavily on the team's morale and the work that will lead to the next races and future regulations. There are those who support Hamilton and those who say he has been reborn after the last race in Baku from a psychological standpoint. On the other hand, there are those who go against Hamilton, like Ralf Schumacher. Let's listen to what he said together. Hamilton explained that his qualifying was compromised by the lack of a fresh set of medium Pirelli tires, used during free practice instead of being saved for Q2. But for Ralf Schumacher, this justification doesn't hold. Lewis needs to take responsibility. With the experience and power he has, if he wanted a certain type of tires, he would have gotten them without any discussion. I wasn't a 7-time world champion and only won a few races, but when I asked for a specific set, they gave it to me. In the end, it's always the driver who has the final say because he's the one who feels the track. A regular engineer would never interfere with the driver's performance, especially a 7-time world champion. According to the former German driver, Hamilton is paying for the legacy of his long tenure at Mercedes, where there was a very hierarchical culture. Sometimes Toto Wolff wanted the drivers to just drive without getting involved in strategies. But this approach doesn't work at Ferrari. Clear communication and a driver who knows how to assert himself are needed. Besides the tire issue, Ralf Schumacher touches on a more delicate topic, namely the relationship between Hamilton and his track engineer, Riccardo Adami. The way they talk to each other over the radio doesn't seem positive to me. There have been public criticisms from Lewis towards the team, and then a failure to swap positions with Leclerc before the finish line, which caused quite a stir. If there's no mutual trust, there's a risk of imploding. Ralf Schumacher is often very direct and sometimes even too much, but this time he touches on a real point. Hamilton needs to take more tactical responsibility. Because it's true that Ferrari's engineers decide the strategies to implement in qualifying and the race, but it's also true that you're a 7-time world champion and you need to take responsibility for the tires you choose in free practice. I myself was surprised that he was left with so few medium tires in qualifying, but surely he also influenced this decision. He let himself be swayed by what the team said. A driver like Max Verstappen, in my opinion, would have asserted himself more. Hamilton knows how to assert himself. He's already done it in his career. He needs to find that necessary harmony that allows him to express himself at his best, even at Ferrari, being clear, direct, without coming across as presumptuous. In short, Hamilton needs to learn to demand what he needs. Let's also look from a technical point of view at why Ferrari chose such a low drag wing in Baku. During the free practice sessions in Baku, Ferrari tested 2 rear wing configurations on the SF25. A more loaded version, the same seen at Spa, designed to generate more downforce and therefore grip in corners, and a less loaded version with the same main plane, but with trims in the DRS area to reduce air resistance and increase top speed. After the tests, Maranello chose the low drag solution for qualifying and the race, focusing on top speed to defend and overtake on Baku's long straights. The choice understandable looking only at Friday's data. However, the strategy was betrayed by the track conditions. Overnight between Friday and Saturday, it rained, the asphalt was washed, and the natural grip decreased, temperatures dropped. The result was a low drag car with less downforce that suddenly struggled to generate grip in slow corners and technical sections. Hence, balance problems led to a complicated qualifying and a race stuck behind DRS trains. So why didn't they mount a more loaded wing? On paper, one might think of returning to a more loaded setup to recover grip, but things weren't that simple. In fact, Ferrari needed 2 fundamental things. Defense on the straights, and there's also a problem with the floor and heights continuing from the Chinese Grand Prix. Basically, Ferrari found itself squeezed between 2 limits. Increasing downforce meant defending poorly and risking technical infractions. Unloading too much, as seen, destroyed stability in corners when grip decreased. The choice of the low drag wing was not senseless in theory. Speed is needed in Baku, but it was too aggressive and without a plan B. Not anticipating the impact of weather and grip is a misreading of the weekend. A top team should have alternative scenarios ready. And let's also talk about Andrea Stella, who defended Piastri and said that even Schumacher made similar mistakes in the past. Let's see his statements in detail. It was a black weekend for Oscar Piastri in Baku. The World Championship leader experienced one of his worst weekends since racing in Formula 1, both in qualifying and the race. But McLaren's team principal, Andrea Stella, didn't point the finger at the young Australian, instead defending him publicly, reminding that even absolute champions like Michael Schumacher made similar mistakes. The Baku City circuit has always been complicated, but for Piastri, it was a real nightmare in Q3 during the decisive attempt for pole. The Australian lost control of his McLaren and hit the barriers, ending up starting only 9th on the grid. Sunday went even worse. Starting from the 3rd row behind before the green light, he had a problem at the start, performing a jump start. He went against the barriers again on the first lap. He said goodbye to his race and the possibility of a comeback. To worsen the situation, Lando Norris's 7th place, which took away McLaren's chance to mathematically close the constructor's title already in Baku. And Andrea Stella said, Let's not dramatize, it happened to everyone. I've worked with multi-champions, and every season I've seen episodes like this. Even Michael Schumacher in his most dominant years made similar mistakes. When you misjudge the available grip in Baku, you're punished immediately. It was an isolated weekend, not a worrying trend. And Stella also talked about another hot topic. McLaren's pit stops, still slow and inconsistent, and even in Baku, as already happened in Monza, Norris lost time during the tire change. In reality, it didn't change the result. We would have still remained in Leclerc's zone, but it's clear we need to improve. You can overtake a fast car, but if you also lack that margin of time in the pits, everything becomes more complicated. Races are increasingly tight and every detail counts. Andrea Stella is right to protect Piastri. He's young, fighting for the championship, and it's a rough weekend that doesn't erase his impressive growth. However, the mistake in qualifying and the one in the race show that the pressure is starting to be felt. With a consistent Norris, a championship approaching the final stretch with Max Verstappen also returning to the fight, the margin for error will be increasingly small, and the pit stop issue is not trivial. In such a tight race, losing 2 to 3 tenths in the pits can cost a key position. McLaren has made a huge step aerodynamically and mechanically, but now it needs to refine the details like a great team. But we also need to talk about Fernando Alonso, because he made an announcement about his retirement. Since arriving at Aston Martin, Alonso has tied his last seasons to a clear goal. Finally having a car capable of fighting for podiums and victories. Lawrence Stroll's team has raised the bar by hiring Adrian Newey, an aerodynamic genius who has won everywhere and now has the mission to transform the AMR26, the Aston Martin of 2026, into the car of the leap in quality. And Alonso explained, "The retirement depends on how I feel physically and mentally next year. If the car is competitive, there are good chances that 2026 will be my last year. I would like to close leaving a positive memory, fighting for positions that matter and not in the middle group." A counterintuitive reasoning. The faster the car, the more Alonso will be pushed to end his career in style. If instead the AMR26 disappoints, he might decide to stay another year or two to not end with an anonymous season and to strengthen Aston Martin's project. Alonso has always been clear-headed in planning his career, although very unlucky in choosing teams. When he was at Ferrari, he refused Red Bull's offer when Red Bull was dominating with Vettel and later chose to go to McLaren when McLaren was not yet competitive with the Honda engine. If the Aston Martin AMR26 is truly competitive with the new regulations, more aerodynamic, simplified engines, 50% hybrid and less weight, it makes sense to talk about an exit as a winner. Ending after a season as a protagonist would be the best possible legacy. The flip side is that if 2026 goes badly, seeing him continue beyond 45 years to seek one last chance could be risky in terms of image and motivation. But knowing Alonso, the hunger to race surpasses any age statistics. And we must conclude the video by talking about Romain Grosjean, who will return to race with a Formula 1 car for the TPC tests, testing previous car. Let's see everything together. 5 years after those dramatic images that no fan will ever forget, the car split in two, the flames of the Bahrain night, him emerging from the fire almost miraculously, Romain Grosjean will return to sit in a Formula 1 cockpit. He will do so with Haas, the team he raced with until 2020 in a TPPC test scheduled for September 26th at Mugello. The incident on November 29th, 2020 in Bahrain was one of the most frightening episodes in recent Formula 1 history. And now, exactly 5 years later, the Frenchman will return to try a Formula 1 car. The announcement came directly from the team. "We are pleased to announce that Romain Grosjean will return to drive one of our cars for the first time since the Bahrain 2020 incident. The test will be held at Mugello and will be a special moment for the whole team." Even Ayao Komatsu, current team principal of Haas, did not hide his emotion. "I am happy to see Romain back in a Formula 1. We shared important years, and it will be a special moment. Even though knowing him, he will still try to push to the maximum." Grosjean also responded, "I thank Gene Haas and Ayao Komatsu for the opportunity. Saying I'm excited is an understatement. I can't believe it's already been 5 years. I will use the helmet my children designed for my last race in Abu Dhabi, which I couldn't participate in." And this is not just sports news, it's a very strong emotional moment for those who follow Formula 1. Grosjean was not a world champion, but his story in 2020 touched everyone, becoming almost the manifesto of modern safety progress in Formula 1, with the halo, fireproof suits, barriers. Seeing him return to a single-seater today means celebrating life and resilience. It is therefore a very important moment not only for the sport, but also on a human level. Let me know in the comments your opinion on all the topics we covered in the video. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any news about Formula 1 and Ferrari. Here from Tato. See you in the next video.